The final question on the Cold War section of paper 2 is an importance question. Remember that you will get 3 options, 3 different bullet points. You only answer 2 of those bullet points. Both are worth 8 marks, so this is worth 16 marks in total. Roughly, you're going to need to spend 24 minutes on this question in total, because you'll need to write 4 Pete, point, evidence, explain, therefore paragraphs, and spend roughly 6 minutes on each of those paragraphs. As always, the first thing that I'm going to do is bug the question. Now, it asks me to explain the importance. That is my action word in this case. I'm then going to underline the keywords that I need to know about, which in this case are the Cuban Missile Crisis. But the importance question is a bit weird, and I'm also going to underline a second action word or key phrase, in this case, Superpower Relations. I must explain in this question the importance of X for Y. The importance of the Cuban Missile Crisis for superpower relations, which effectively refers to tension. In most cases in the exam, they're basically asking you about tension. Superpower relations, the relationship between the Soviet Union and the USSR, the development of the Cold War. All of those are stock phrases which they use in this question, which effectively refer to tension, either getting better or worse, depending on the event. Out of the 3 options, there will usually be 2 that are pretty much about tension, that are asking you about those things I mentioned before. There's usually 1 other which is on something slightly different. In last summer's exam, it asked you about Czechoslovakia and the Prague Spring and its importance for the Soviets' control of Eastern Europe. That's a slightly trickier question. So I'd encourage you to read all 3 carefully, work out which ones are about tension, and probably answer those, because they're a little bit easier. There's a particular way that you need to answer this question. Obviously, as I mentioned, you're going to write 2 Pete paragraphs per bullet point you answer. Remember, you're answering 2 of the 3. But you'll base those paragraphs on one of 3 things: consequences, affected people, or tension. And to help us remember that, we have a really handy acronym that we call CAT. An event can be important because of its future consequences. An event can be important for the Cold War because it affected people at the time. An event can be important in the Cold War because it increased or decreased tension. As I've mentioned a couple of times now, you're going to write 2 paragraphs for each. Therefore, you don't need to write a paragraph on all 3 of these things. Pick the 2 that are most appropriate. For example, you might talk about consequences in affected people, consequences and tension. You might look at an event and say, well, there's 2 really clear consequences here that are important, so just do 2 paragraphs on consequences. Whatever combination, doesn't matter. Just make sure you're writing 2 paragraphs about why the event is important. Otherwise, like I said, it's a basic Pete paragraph, nothing special. 1 reason the Cuban Missile Crisis was important for superpower relations was because of its consequences. That's my point. I've used the words from the question: Cuban Missile Crisis, important, superpower relations. And I've given a reason why I think it's important, consequences. I'm making a claim or a point. I'm now going to back that up with some factual evidence. One consequence of the crisis was détente. Which means a reduction of tension. Full stop. After the Cuban Missile Crisis, the USA and USSR realized they had to avoid conflict in the future. As such, a hotline was set up between the Kremlin in Moscow and the White House in Washington. If there were another crisis, the leaders could talk directly to prevent nuclear war. This meant that tension was reduced. Therefore, one reason the Cuban Missile Crisis was important for superpower relations was that it led to détente. Which helped avoid any future conflict between the superpowers. So, like I said before, this is just a basic Pete paragraph. I make my point here at the top that the Cuban Missile Crisis is important because of its consequences. And I use the words from the question to prove to the examiner that I am answering the question. I then give quite a lot of detail actually about one consequence, in this case, détente, caused by the hotline that was set up between the USSR and the USA. I explain how this was motivated to avoid future conflict. I know I'm explaining because I use the phrase, "this meant that." So I give evidence or facts, and I explain how those facts prove the point or claim that I made, that superpower relations mean that the Cuban Missile Crisis is important, for superpower relations because of its consequences. Also, as we know, just as crucial is that I summarize my points at the end in a therefore sentence. Therefore, what is it exactly that I have proved? I have proved that the Cuban Missile Crisis is important for superpower relations because it led to détente. It's important because of one of its consequences. In the second paragraph, I'm going to discuss why it's important for reducing tension. Now, I'm only going to write the sentence starter, or the start of my point. You're going to need to finish this paragraph yourself, as practice before the exam on Thursday. Another reason the Cuban Missile Crisis was important for superpower relations. Again, I'm using the words from the question. Was because it helped reduce tension. As the USA and USSR had come so close to nuclear war, they signed treaties in the late 60s such as, you probably noticed that in my previous paragraph I didn't mention any of those treaties in the late 60s, such as the Outer Space Treaty or the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. I did that on purpose. Sometimes writing a good exam answer is about saving your knowledge for a later paragraph. And that's what I've done in this case. I'd like you now to copy and complete this second paragraph on your own. Remember, you can send your copies to me on Google Classroom for me to mark before Thursday. Otherwise, best of luck.